What's up, y'all? My name is Michael Sigler, and I know you're going to find this surprising, but I have some camera thoughts. I have another surprise for you, unless you can read and have seen the title. I've sold my Fuji X100VI and replaced it with a Panasonic Lumix S9. These two cameras are both very similar and very different, so I thought I'd make a video and kind of compare the two in case you happen to be considering a switch from one to the other, or maybe you're cross-shopping the two of them and can't decide. This isn't really a versus or S9 destroys X100 kind of video because I'm not that kind of nerd. I just like cameras. I'm not super loyal to one brand over another, and I really don't like that everything has to be a clickbaity zero-sum competition where one camera is king and one camera got pwned. I'm going to basically just drop in pictures from both cameras all through this video when I'm not trying to show you something specific, just to drive home the point that there's really not a wrong choice here. I'm not an amazing photographer, and I've gotten really cool shots out of both of these cameras. I'll step off my soapbox now and start with how they are similar. Like, why would you even compare these two cameras? First off, they're pretty similar in size. The Fuji is 521 grams and 128 by 75 by 55 millimeters. The S9 is 486 grams and 126 by 74 by 47 millimeters, but that doesn't really tell the whole story. The Fuji's a fixed lens system, so that size represents the camera in a usable state. That's actually the size and weight of the camera you would carry around. The S9, on the other hand, is an interchangeable lens system, and the size figures for the body do not include a lens. Depending on which lens you choose to mount to it, it can be very close to the size of the body only, or it can be drastically different. I'll cover that more in depth later. They both have some form of color profiles. The X100 has film simulations, and the S9 has real-time LUTs. These both allow you to take photos or videos with different looks baked right in. They both have IBIS, allowing you to shoot smooth video and take photos at slow shutter speed with no motion blur, or at least no motion blur from your hand shaking. They're fairly similar in price. The Fuji's MSRP is $15.99, although good luck actually buying one for MSRP, and the Lumix is $17.97, but the Lumix is near perpetually on sale for $15.97 with the 18 to 40 kit lens. In actual practice, the S9 is cheaper because you can actually purchase it, like today, for basically $1,600, but either way, they're close enough in price that the comparison makes sense. In short, they're similarly sized cameras that produce good pictures and good video, and are small enough that you might consider them for a travel camera or an everyday carry camera or a dad cam or mom cam. So let's dive into how they differ and why you might choose one over the other. I guess I'll start with the physical differences. While the S9 body is very similar in size to the X100, you can change that drastically with your lens choice. The 18 to 40 kit lens is pretty small and covers a very usable range for a travel camera, but it's also pretty slow with a variable aperture between f4 and f4.5 and f6.3. The lens I'm currently using most often on my S9 is the Sigma 35 f2. It's pretty fast and it takes great photos, but it's also reasonably big and heavy and makes the camera significantly larger than the X100. I would show you this by holding the camera up with the Sigma 35 on it, but I'm actually recording this video with that lens right now, so I'll just use some B-roll or a picture or something. Panasonic has very recently said that they're actively developing smaller primes for the S9, but I would always advise people to purchase the product as it is currently and don't bank on future software or accessory improvements, because you never really know if those will come to fruition or not. And right now the small lens selection for the S9 is fairly poor. I think both cameras handle pretty poorly in stock form, if I'm being honest. The S9 with a small rig grip is pretty good. I don't super care for any of the grips for the X100, but since it is smaller and lighter in actual use, I found it to be at least decent, like just on a neck strap. The X100 uses more vintage style controls with control rings on the top of the camera, while the S9 controls are more like a modern hybrid camera with a PASM dial. I prefer the look of the vintage controls, but in actual use, I've found that I actually prefer the PASM dial. I usually shoot in either aperture priority or shutter priority, and the S9 has 5 programmable custom modes that I've set up to cover most all of my use cases with a flick of one dial, versus having to move a bunch of stuff around to effectively change modes. The S9 lacks a hot shoe, a flash, and an EVF. That probably either matters a lot to you or not very much at all. The hot shoe doesn't bother me at all. About the only thing I ever mount there is a microphone or a light for video, so the cold shoe on the S9 is fine. The flash also doesn't bother me. I don't do a ton of flash photography, and I do have an S5 II if I want to do flash photography. The EVF is something that I thought I would really miss, but I honestly really don't. At least for the kind of camera this is, like, it just doesn't matter that much. I use it as like my everyday carry camera, so it's mostly just like day in the life kind of stuff. Pictures of Daisy or Ava when we go out to eat, travel pictures and short videos, just seeing cool stuff that I want to photograph in my normal daily life and things like that. I find I don't super miss the EVF for that kind of photography. I do like shooting vintage manual lenses, and I do very strongly prefer an EVF for that, but again, I have an S5 II. If you're seeing a developing theme, it's that the S9 is amazing as a second camera. None of the shortcomings are that big of a deal if you can just switch off to the other body that has a hot shoe for flash and has an EVF and has a great grip and ergonomics. Like, kind of makes the shortcomings not really matter that much. Another key difference to consider is sensor size. The X100VI has an APS-C sensor, while the S9 has a much larger full-frame sensor. Outside in good light, that doesn't make a whole lot of difference in my experience. You do, of course, get a blurrier background and shallower depth of field on the full-frame S9, but aside from that, both take great pictures in good light, unsurprisingly. At night or indoors, though, the larger sensor is very nice to have. Take a look at these pictures. This first one is the X100 at ISO 6400 in low-ish light. If you look at the sky, you can see that the APS-C sensor is already starting to struggle a little, and it's getting a bit noisy. It's not unusable or anything, but it's starting to get pretty rough. You can just like look at that and know that if you increase the ISO any further, it's going to start to look pretty bad. This is the S9 at ISO 6400. A few things here. First off, it's just less noisy. Second off, I just stopped all the way down to f5.6 to get it to choose ISO 6400 in aperture priority mode, while the X100 was wide open at f2. Even in pretty low light, unless you're trying to expose for shadows, the larger sensor S9 will try to stick around its high dual native ISO of 4000. It's exactly what's happening in this picture. Also worth noting that while the shutter speed on the Fuji was pretty slow at 1/40th, both of those S9 photos were taken at 1/200th of a second. The X100 also has a higher resolution sensor at 40 megapixels versus the S9's 24. You do have more freedom to crop in on your picture, but that also is responsible for some of the penalty in low light performance, so there's that to consider. So basically, you probably know how the exposure triangle works if you're watching this video, so you can pick your own benefit. Assuming you're also shooting with an f2 lens, like the X100 has, you're going to get either lower ISO and less noise, or faster shutter speed, or be able to stop down and still get the same or better low light performance versus the Fuji with its smaller sensor. Alternatively, you could use a smaller, slower lens like the Sigma 45 2.8 and get performance as good or better than the f2 Fuji. Speaking of lenses, the fact that the S9 is an interchangeable lens camera is another key difference. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's very hard for an interchangeable lens camera to be as small as a fixed lens camera, so you're gonna pay a size and weight penalty. But on the other hand, you do have the option to pick something like the small and light Lumix 18-40 kit zoom when you're walking around outside during the day, and then switch over to a faster prime at night. The X100's lens is small and will never get bigger, but it will also never be faster or longer or wider. You're basically trading choice in favor of that compact size. So why did I switch, and which one should you buy? In short, I got spoiled by having a full frame camera. and I wanted a full frame camera that was easier to carry around, so I had a full frame camera all the time. The S9's design means it fits very well in a bag, and I pretty much am always carrying a bag. The size and weight penalties are real if it's going to hang from your neck all day, but they're negligible if you're carrying a backpack or a messenger bag anyway. Also, I actually prefer the S9's real-time LUTs to Fuji's film sims. Some of the film simulations are fantastic, but you are limited to what Fuji gives you. If they come out with a new one that you like, you might get it on your older camera pretty quickly, or you might get it in a few months, or you might get it never. With the Lumix Lab app, you can download any LUT you like. You can find them on the internet and put them on your SD card and load them directly on the camera without using the app if you want to. If you have a particular style already, you can shoot a photo with the S9, put that photo into your favorite photo editor, edit it until you get a look that you like, then export those edits as a LUT and load that onto your camera and shoot with your very own edits already baked right in. Overall, it's just much more flexible. Also, I sold my Nikon ZF and I bought a Panasonic S5 II pretty much solely to converge on one lens mount. So now I love the fact that the S9 is an interchangeable lens camera, and specifically an L-mount camera, because while I normally keep that Sigma 35 f2 on the S9 and the Lumix 51.8 on the S5 II, I don't have to. I've always thought I was a 35mm kind of guy. That's long been my preferred focal length, and sometimes it still is, like for travel. But I've also been having a bit of a love affair with 50mm lately. It's kind of like the perfect middle ground. It's not so tight that you can't use it for street photography and day in the life kind of stuff, but it's also not so wide that you can't take good portrait style photos with it. If I still had the X100 and decided I wanted it to have a 50mm lens, sucks for me, I guess. With the S9, I just put the 50mm lens on it if I'm in the mood to shoot at 50mm. The lens is slightly longer than the 35 f2, something like 8 or 10mm, but it's also a little bit lighter, so it basically feels identical in my bag. Video is another area in which the S9 is the clear winner. The Fuji shoots decent video, but the S9 has so many more options, like open gate recording and way, way, way better stabilization. It also has MP4 light mode that's basically an open gate setting like for social media. It's full sensor readout like normal open gate, but it's scaled down to 3.8K instead of 6K. It's perfect for shooting little videos that you might want to post on social media with the flexibility to punch out both a portrait video and a widescreen video for like YouTube B-roll. There are some people who will probably like the Fuji more. So here are some ways in which the Fuji is better. It's better looking and it feels better built. The S9 is kind of plasticky. It feels like good quality plastic, but it feels like plastic. The X100 is made of metal and it feels like it. The X100 definitely wins if you prefer the vintage style photo controls. I personally find I like the PASM hybrid camera style controls, but that's just me. If you like the dials on top, you'll prefer the X100. The X100 has a viewfinder. So if having a viewfinder is like a make or break kind of thing for you, well, there you go. The X100 has a hot shoe as well as a built-in flash. If you make frequent use of a flash, you're going to want the X100 because the S9 not only doesn't have a flash, it doesn't have a hot shoe, so you can't even put a flash on it. And finally, the size. Panasonic may very well come through on their promise to release some awesome small primes for the S9 and make this much less of an issue, and I certainly hope they do. But right now, if you want a more compact camera, the X100 is definitely more compact. But it's still not that compact. It's not really going to fit in your jacket pocket unless your jacket has very large pockets. My logic was basically that if I need to carry a bag to put my camera in, and I found I did with the X100, I might as well just have a camera that's a bit larger with a much larger sensor. There are really not any wrong choices here. They're both great cameras, and you can take beautiful photos with either one of them. I'm very happy with my choice to go from the X100 to the S9, but I'm sure other people have gone the opposite way and have been very happy with their choice too. If you're still unsure, maybe check out lensrentals.com. As the name pretty strongly implies, they rent lenses, but they also rent cameras. You can test drive any camera you're considering, usually for not much money, and that's my best advice here. If nothing I've said has made you super duper sure you want one or the other, just try them both. It's not like a sponsored thing or anything. It's just how I evaluate cameras and lenses most of the time, is just rent them and try them out for a week. I think that's about it. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, it would be very helpful if you, well, liked it. Also subscribe. See you next time.